my name is Elliot Harrison Lee. I'm a member of the Gender Spectrum Youth Council, and today I'm here with Mase III, who is a writer and advocate. And do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Number one, thank you for having me, Elliot. So my name is Mase, and I run an organization called Awkward, which seeks to uplift the work of trans and queer folks of color specifically through the arts and through performance and all of that. And do a lot of nerdy things around faith. So right now I'm also the co-editor for a project called the Black Trans Prayer Book.
Awesome. I know that you have a lot of projects you're working on, and if there's any specific things that you want to share with people who might be watching and how they can support those. Um, yeah.
Yeah, so I think for me, the biggest project I'm working on right now, obviously, is the Black Trans Prayer Book, and so that project came up, sort of some of the stuff that we were just even talking about, like what does it look like to have all these different faith spaces. The reality is since colonization, transphobia has been used as a tool of white supremacy, right? That's something that we see from notes of different colonizers, like the first white colonizers into Panama, like to what is now called Panama. We look at what was happening in East and West Africa with some of the colonizers and what they observed as far as seeing people of different genders that they didn't understand, right? And so they specifically used a violent type of white supremacy Christianity to attack people and to not just murder trans and gender nonconforming people, but anyone that also saw those people as sacred. And so because I feel like we're in this very particular time in which people are more inclined to think about the impacts of white supremacy, we need to think more also about how that plays into our faith. And so what the Black Trans Prayer Book is doing a few things. It's one, it's reclaiming the history and understanding of the history and actually documenting the ways in which in those places that some of that stuff came up and comes up in the ways that colonizers specifically use their faith as a practice to really create a genocide of trans bodies, especially specifically Black and brown trans bodies, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's also really important in this conversation. That's about specific types of trans bodies. And we also know that impact still comes into the ways that we're criminalized as trans people of color, especially, right? So that our very bodies, like we're consistently legislated against, we're consistently attacked. When we look at things like bathroom bills, we look at policies in schools, we look at policies around jobs, the people that are most hit, especially around transes, tend to be people of color, period,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we want to find healing tools through prayer practice and through meditation practice. And again, in the same way that history piece claim the ways that very toxic version of faith still bleeds out into how we live today. And so that'll be also part of the prayer book. And so we're going to be holding a retreat that's going to be happening for folks from all over the country to kind of come together to create this book in a few months. And people can donate to that project on GoFundMe. So you can look up the Black Trans Prayer Book and you can put some coins in our pockets. Or myself and my colleague Dame Figueroa Didi, we perform as poets. We do workshops, we do scripture workshops and other sort of competency workshops for different faith groups. So you can call on us. And we go for all the way from ancient Sumer to all the way up to through the Quran and looking at trans bodies in the text if people want to kind of check us out for that. So you can also look us for those things.
Yeah, awesome. And I think we'll probably put a link to the GoFundMe in the description of the video when we post it. One more big question, which you've touched on a little bit before, but how do you react and deal with transphobic and racist religious spaces? What is it that you do to just, I don't know, what is it that you do to deal with that?
So here's the biggest thing. So now we're gonna
delve into yeah.
Yeah, that's a big question. We said 20
Okay.
minutes. But so here's the thing that I also realized. So I used to actually do some organizing with an organization where we went all over the country and specifically worked with anti-queer faith communities, right? And so I noticed something very quickly, that we were going to all these different places. We got to meet with high leaders of the Mormon Church. We got to meet with people at religious schools and all these different places. And I noticed that we're all using words around faith, and yet some of us were talking about, our actual faith, and some of us were actually talking about the consolidation of power. So I think the first thing I try to evaluate with people is this person talking to me about their genuine faith, or are they talking about the consolidation of power, right? Because again, we have to think about how white supremacy, how colonization, how all these things are actually impacting what this person is saying, right? And how they're actually interpreting the text, right? If they're a person that I'm purporting, that I'm understanding that their actual goal is not actually to see me as a human being, I don't do anything with that. I can't, as far as me wanting to be a part of their space, because I actually don't want to, but also because it's toxic and it's meant to kill me, right? So that is a place where I don't try to play nice. And if I need something in that space, that's where we do have to be clear with people about what we expect about how if your interpretation of faith and religion and the fruits of your works pushes people away from religion, you're doing it wrong. Like, you're doing it wrong, and you're doing it for the wrong reasons. So I think we have to have those really clear conversations with our faith leaders about what we will and will not accept. If it is someone that I do, or people that I feel like are really just in spaces in which they need to be having more broad conversations that maybe they haven't thought about, because even just the story I gave you, right? So I learned that from this person who's a playwright and theologian named Peterson Toscano. Like, that was the first time I thought about liberation theology in that way, like around a trans lens. And so, that opened my mind as as a trans person. That opened my mind, like, oh my goodness, I didn't even think I had the ability to be seen in this way. When I have conversations with lots of pastors, reverends, bishops, they also, imams, like, they also haven't thought about stories from a trans lens, so they can't teach what they don't know. So I expound my learning, I do my research. So when I am having conversations, they're like, well, what about this? Let's talk about this. And those people, if they're coming from a place of love, those people can move closer to being more compassionate and more thoughtful about how they actually engage with scripture and its impacts, right? Because it has those real world impacts, versus people that, again, because like on this side with people that just want to consolidate power, that's, we get into tactics like direct organizing, we get into tactics like shaming, like that's unfortunately like if you're not going to see me as a human, I'll tell you what, I'm going to be seen as a human today, or at least someone's going to get stuff done. So I'm going to use whatever tactics I need to get things done in that space. But people that are in a space of understanding me in that context, we can have conversations. I would also articulate that it's also, if we're not in a space where we can have those conversations with people, that's also not our responsibility. Like, our responsibility as trans people, especially as trans people of color, especially as young trans people of color, is to survive to being adults, right?
Yeah.
To survive, right? So if you're not in an emotional space to have that conversation, leave that to someone else. Don't have that conversation. Fine, I do think it's really important to reach out online to people and spaces that you feel called to be in. If you feel a type of spiritual abuse happening, even in spaces that tell you that they're affirming, if you don't feel affirmed, it's okay to believe that they are not affirming of you, right? Move on to the next one. There are literally millions of people, millions of trans people on this planet. Many of them are people of faith, many of them people of spirit, many of them people that are also trying to answer the same questions, right? And so I know wholeheartedly, because I've experienced so many of those people over my lifetime, you will find your community and your people.
Thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you for talking with me. I really appreciate questions and just a hang time.
Yeah, I appreciate your answers.